The moment a stranger pressed a folded napkin into my palm at the Tim Hortons on Ontario Street and whispered, "Read this before midnight, Mrs. Whitford, or you won't see morning," I understood that the life I had rebuilt since my husband's funeral was already finished. I just didn't know it yet. It was a Tuesday in late October, and the sky over Mississauga was the color of wet slate. I had been coming to that same Tim Hortons every Tuesday and Thursday for almost 2 years, ever since my husband Daniel passed. The woman at the counter knew to start my double-double the moment she saw my blue coat through the glass, and she never asked how I was keeping on. That mattered more than she understood. At 67, I had learned that the kindest thing strangers can offer you is not sympathy but routine. That afternoon I was not alone. My son Caleb sat across from me in the booth, his leather jacket still damp from the drizzle, and beside him was his wife Renata, a woman I had tried for 9 years to love the way a mother-in-law is supposed to. She stirred her tea with the tip of her wooden stir stick, over and over, the way she always did when she was about to ask for something. "Mom," Caleb said, and I already knew. When he wanted something, he used the word the way other people used a crowbar. "We've been thinking. The house on Credit Valley is too much for you now. The property taxes in Peel alone are going to gut you by spring." Renata nodded without looking up. "We found a lovely retirement community in Burlington. Suites, not rooms. You'd have your own kitchenette." I smiled the small smile I had practiced in the mirror since the funeral. "I've lived in that house 42 years, Caleb. Your father and I raised you in that kitchen. I know what the taxes are." "That's exactly the problem." Renata finally lifted her eyes. "You know what they are and you're still stubborn about it. The market is finally cooling. If we list before Christmas, you could clear well over $1 million. Put it in a GIC. Live comfortably for the rest of your years." My rest of my years. She said it like she had counted them. Caleb placed his hand over mine across the table, and I noticed for the first time in my life that his hand did not feel like his father's. Daniel's hands had been warm and dry, calloused from 30 years of framing houses on the Mississauga lots that were farmland when we were young. Caleb's hand was cold. They went up together to pay. I remember being surprised by that, because Caleb never paid for anything without being asked twice. I sat in the booth folding my napkin into halves, then quarters, watching the rain begin to flick against the window, and that was when the woman slid into the seat beside me. She was perhaps 60, maybe a little older, with the kind of cropped silver hair that retired school teachers wear. Her parka was army green, zipped to the throat, and she had a Roots tote bag on her shoulder. Nothing about her looked dangerous. Everything about her eyes did. "Eleanor Whitford," she said. Not a question. "Yes." She did not smile. She reached across and folded a napkin into my palm, and underneath it I felt the weight of something small and metal. "Read this before midnight," she said, her voice low and steady. "Don't open it here. Don't tell your son. Whatever you do, don't answer your door tonight until you've read every word. Do you understand me, dear?" I could not speak. I nodded. "Your husband was a good man. He asked me to find you if the day ever came." Her eyes flickered toward the counter, where Caleb was laughing at something the cashier had said. "The day came last week." She stood, adjusted her tote, and walked out past the drive-through window without looking back. By the time Caleb and Renata returned with the receipt, the parking lot had already swallowed her. "You all right, Mom?" Caleb asked. "You look pale." "I'm fine." I slid the napkin deep into my coat pocket. Just the weather. They drove me home along Mississauga Road, past the houses that had been built on the fields where Daniel used to hunt pheasant with his father in the 70s. At the end of our long gravel lane, Caleb stopped the car but did not shut off the engine. "Think about Burlington, Mom. Please. Renata can send you the brochure tonight. I'll think I said. I stood at the end of my driveway until their taillights disappeared toward the QEW, and only then did I let myself shake. Our house sat at the top of the lane, white clapboard with forest green shutters, 3.5 acres backing onto a Credit River tributary that had been in Daniel's family since his grandfather bought it for $800 in 1952. Inside, I locked the deadbolt, then the chain, then the door to the mudroom. I had never once, in 42 years, locked all three. I sat at the pine table Daniel had built the winter after Caleb was born, and I unfolded the napkin. Inside was a small brass key, old-fashioned, with a head worn smooth by a thumb I would never know. Taped to it was a slip of paper, no larger than a bus transfer. The handwriting was careful and angular. 11:47 p.m. Answer on the third ring. Don't speak his name aloud. That was all. I looked at the oven clock. Just past 6. The house ticked around me the way old houses do as the heat comes on, and the sound felt, for the first time in 2 years, like something was listening back. I did not eat supper. I sat in Daniel's chair by the wood stove and watched the windows go from gray to black. At 10, I turned off every light in the house, except the hood lamp over the stove, and I watched the driveway, the way I had watched it the morning the RCMP officer came to tell me about the accident on the 401. At 11:30, I set my phone face up on the kitchen table and folded my hands over it like a woman praying. At 11:47, on the second ring, my thumb hovered, and I remembered the note and waited. On the third ring, I answered. For a long moment there was only breath. Then a voice came through, low and distorted, as if it were being passed through layers of cloth. Ellie. The kitchen tilted. No one had called me Ellie since Daniel. Not our son, not my sisters, not the man at the hardware store in Streetsville who had known me since 1987. Only Daniel. Ellie, don't say my name, please. I have 4 minutes. My throat closed around nothing. Don't trust Caleb. Don't trust Renata. Don't sign anything the lawyer in Oakville puts in front of you, not one page. And Ellie, do not trust Sergeant Devereaux from 12 Division, whatever he tells you, whatever uniform he wears. This isn't possible, I whispered. My own voice did not belong to me. I didn't die the way they told you. The voice cracked, steadied. The brake lines, the truck that hit me. None of it was chance. They did it because I was close, and they thought I wouldn't have told you yet. They were right. Who is they? Our son. A long pause. Our son and the people he's in with. The land, Ellie. It was always the land. They need you off it before the ground freezes, or they lose the window until April. The line hissed. Under the floor of the shed, the voice said. Not the tool bench. The corner where I spilled paint in 98. You'll know the board. Go tonight. They'll come tomorrow. Daniel, I said, because I could not stop myself. The line went dead. I pulled the phone from my ear with 2 hands. On the screen, the call log showed nothing. No number, no record, no missed call. As if the conversation had happened inside my own skull. But my hand was still shaking, and the key on the table was still warm from my palm. I did not sleep. Somewhere around 3 in the morning I stopped trying. I made coffee that I did not drink, and I sat by the back window watching the yard light flicker against the cedars, and I thought about the year before Daniel died. He had changed. I had told myself at the time that it was ordinary, the kind of drift that happens when a man turns 68 and his knees start to go. He stopped sleeping through the night. He began taking long walks along the tributary, down past the old spring house, at hours when a man our age ought to be reading the Star in bed. He installed a second padlock on the shed and would not tell me why. Once, in February, I had come into the mudroom, and found him cleaning mud off the barrel of a rifle I did not know we still owned. "Dan," I had said, "what on earth?" He had smiled the way he always did when he wanted me to stop asking. "Coyotes in the backfield, Ellie love. Don't you worry about it." I had not worried. I had wanted not to worry, which is a different thing entirely, and I had paid for that difference. With 2 years of widowhood I was now beginning to understand had been engineered. At dawn, I pulled on Daniel's old barn coat and my rubber boots, and I walked down to the shed with the flashlight in my hand, though the sky was already gray enough to see by. The padlock opened to the brass key on the first try. The smell inside was the smell of every rural Ontario shed in November. Sawdust, two-stroke oil, mice. I found the paint stain without having to look. It was the color of a rust-red barn, dried and cracked now, in the corner furthest from the door. I knelt on the cold plywood and ran my fingers along the seams, and the third board lifted out as cleanly as a drawer. Beneath it, wrapped in heavy contractor's plastic, was a flat metal toolbox the size of a Bible. I carried it to the house. I did not open it at the kitchen table, where Caleb had sat 1,000 times, where Renata had drunk my tea. I carried it up to the attic bedroom that had been Daniel's mother's, the one with the little dormer window that faced the river, and I sat on the cedar chest, and I opened it there. Inside were 4 USB sticks in a freezer bag, a black notebook held shut with an elastic band, a manila envelope of photographs, a bank book from a credit union in Brampton that I had never heard him mention, and on top of everything, a letter in his handwriting, sealed in a plain white envelope with my name on the front. The letter began, "Ellie, love, if you are reading this, I'm sorry. I tried to clean it up without you ever needing to know, and I failed. I read it 3 times. I read it 4. When I finished, the sky over the river had gone from gray to a thin, watery blue, and my tea was cold, and I understood what my husband had died inside of. The 3.5 acres we called home were only the visible part. Beneath the back third of the property, running under the tributary bank and out toward the concession road, was an old field drainage tunnel that Daniel's grandfather had dug during the Depression to move water off the flats. It had been abandoned when municipal tiling came in, sealed at both ends, forgotten. Daniel and I had not thought of it in decades. Caleb had remembered. For at least 3 years, according to Daniel's notebook, our son had been using it. First to move cigarettes over the Akwesasne border route, Daniel wrote. Then harder things. The tributary let a small boat slip in from the credit, under cover of cedars, up to a culvert that opened inside our north field. From there, the tunnel. From there, onto quiet roads that ran up to the 401 and away. Daniel had discovered it by accident, the way he discovered most things, by walking his own land at dusk. He had tried to stop it without losing his son. He had confronted Caleb twice. Caleb had promised, both times, that he was already getting out. Daniel had been killed on the 14th of November, 2 years ago this week, when his pickup went through the guardrail on a dry stretch of the 407 at 3 in the afternoon. The OPP report had called it a medical event. Daniel's cardiologist, in the letter now in my lap, had written that his last stress test was the healthiest it had been in a decade. I sat in that attic bedroom and I did not cry. Crying was a thing I had done for 2 years, for a death that had not been what I thought. What I felt now was different. It was the cold, flat anger that a woman my age learns to fold up small and carry in a pocket, the way my own mother had carried it through 30 years of marriage to a man from Cape Breton who drank. I was still holding the letter when I heard tires on the gravel. I went to the dormer. Caleb's Jeep was coming up the lane, and behind it, a police cruiser I did not recognize. Not OPP. Peel Regional. The light bar was off. I had perhaps 90 seconds. I put everything back into the toolbox except the letter and one USB stick, which I slid into the pocket of my cardigan. The toolbox I pushed to the back of the cedar chest and covered with my mother-in-law's wedding quilt. Then I went downstairs, put the kettle on, and opened the door before they could knock. "Mom," Caleb said. He was pale. "This is Sergeant Devereaux. He's a friend." Dever was a tall man in his 50s with a mustache, a decade out of fashion, and eyes that had looked at too many kitchens like mine. He took off his cap at the door, which I noticed because Daniel had taught Caleb to do the same thing, and Caleb had forgotten. "Mrs. Whitford," Devereaux said, "I won't keep you long. Your son and daughter-in-law have expressed some concerns about your well-being. I'm just here as a courtesy, to make sure you're safe and lucid." "Lucid," I repeated. Renata came in behind them without being invited, already unzipping her coat. "Eleanor, don't be like that. Caleb says you didn't answer the phone this morning. Twice. I slept in." "You don't sleep in." She was already walking through my living room, her eyes moving along the mantel, the side tables, the hall, looking. "Caleb, she looks exhausted. Look at her." I poured 4 mugs of tea I had no intention of anyone drinking. My hands did not shake, which surprised me. "Sergeant?" I said. "I'm fine. I had a rough night. My husband's anniversary is this week." Devereaux glanced at Caleb, and in that glance I saw everything the voice on the phone had told me was true. It was the look of 2 men checking in with each other on a script. "Mom." Caleb sat down across from me, and his hands were trembling, and for one terrible second I wanted to believe that some part of what he was doing was grief. "We're worried you're not safe out here alone. Renata and I have been talking to a lawyer in Oakville about a power of attorney for personal care. Just temporary. Just until we're sure." "I have a power of attorney already," I said. "Your father and I signed them in 2009. I keep mine with Margaret Lowen in Streetsville." "Those are outdated," Renata said quickly. Too quickly. "They are not outdated." Devereaux cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitford, if your family and your physician agree that a capacity assessment is warranted, we can arrange one this afternoon. We have a doctor on call. It's not adversarial." "Not adversarial," I repeated again. It was becoming my only defense, that small echo. Caleb was looking at the floor, his father's eyes, and none of his father's spine. I thought of Daniel on 100 Saturday mornings, carrying this boy on his shoulders through this very kitchen, and I felt the anger in my pocket flatten further, harden further, into something I could use. "I'd like you all to leave," I said. "Mum, now, please. I'd like to call Margaret Lowen, and I'd like to take a bath, and I'd like you to leave my house." Devereaux stood first. He was not surprised. "Mrs. Whitford, I'll check on you tomorrow. If your son calls 911 again before then, we'll have to take a different approach. Do you understand me?" I understood him perfectly. I watched them from the kitchen window until the Jeep and the cruiser were past the willow at the bottom of the lane. Then I went to the phone, and I did not call Margaret Lowen, because I did not yet know who on my small list of old and trusted people was still my own. I called Tim Hortons on Ontario Street instead. The manager, a young woman I had seen behind the counter for 6 months, was confused but kind. Yes, she remembered the woman in the green parka from yesterday. Yes, she came in most Tuesdays around 2. No, she did not know her name, but she always paid with a debit card. And here the young woman paused. She had once left a receipt on the counter with a phone number written on the back, asking if anyone had lost it. The manager had kept it in the drawer. She read me the number. I wrote it down with a hand that still did not shake. The woman answered on the second ring, as if she had been waiting. "Eleanor, who are you?" "My name is Frances Beaudry. I was a forensic accountant with the CRA for 31 years. I retired in 19. Your husband came to me through a mutual friend 18 months before he died. He brought me numbers that should not have existed on a property your family has owned since the Korean War. We became friends, Mrs. Whitford. He was a very fine man. I sat down on the hall bench. He called me last night. There was a long pause on her end. I was afraid of that. What does that mean? It means we don't have much time, and I need you to listen very carefully. Your husband recorded everything he learned onto 4 encrypted drives. He gave me the keys to open them. He told me that if he was ever killed, I was to wait until you came to the shed on your own, not before. He did not want you to carry this until you chose to. That was the kind of man he was. I know what kind of man he was. My voice finally broke. I let it. The OPP have a task force out of Bolton that has been looking for the mouth of that tunnel for 2 years. They know what goes through it. They do not know where it comes out. Your husband's drives will tell them. Your son will be arrested within a week of those drives reaching the right hands. So will Sergeant Devereaux, who is on a list your husband compiled that I cannot say more about on a phone. What do you need me to do? Bring everything you found. Tonight, 9 o'clock. The parking lot behind the Credit Valley Hospital, the staff lot, east side. Drive your own car. Do not tell anyone. If your son comes to the house before then, do not open the door, and do not let him see the toolbox. If you cannot leave, call me, and I will come to you. Eleanor. Yes, your husband was very proud of you. He told me, more than once, that the reason he waited so long to tell you was that he knew if he did, you would not stop until it was finished. He was right about that, wasn't he? I did not answer her. I did not need to. The rest of that day passed in a strange, clean quiet. I packed the toolbox into a Canadian Tire bag, then into a second bag, and I put it in the trunk of my Corolla under a folded tarp. I called Margaret Lowen after all and told her, in careful words, that if anything happened to me in the next 48 hours, she was to go directly to a staff sergeant named Odegaard at the OPP detachment in Bolton. I made her write the name down twice. She did not ask me why. 42 years of being Daniel Whitford's friend had taught her when not to. At 5 to 9, I pulled out of my driveway with my headlights off until the end of the lane. I took the back roads toward the hospital, through Arundel and across the Credit on the old bridge, because the main roads felt lit up in a way they hadn't when I was younger. I kept looking in the rear view. No one followed. I wanted to believe no one followed. Frances Beaudry was standing beside a gray Subaru in the staff lot. She was alone. When I rolled down my window, she only said, "Good. Pop the trunk, please, love." We transferred the toolbox to her car in under a minute. She handed me an unmarked envelope in return. "This is a statement your husband signed and notarized in my kitchen in May of the year he died," she said. "It is addressed to you. If anything happens to me between now and when the arrests are made, you give that to Staff Sergeant Odegaard and no one else. Understood?" "Understood. Go home, Eleanor. Lock every door. Do not answer anyone who is not me or Margaret. If Caleb comes, call 911 and ask for dispatch, not your local division. Say the words domestic fear, urgent, need outside detachment. They will understand." "Frances," I said. "What if I had never opened the envelope?" She looked at me for a long moment across the roof of her car in the yellow hospital light. "Then I would have opened it for you, my dear. In a year, maybe 2. Your husband made me promise. But you opened it yourself, and that is better. That is much better for what comes next." I drove home through rain that had started somewhere around Mavis Road. I locked every door, as she had said. I slept, for the first time in 36 hours, in Daniel's chair by the wood stove with the phone on my lap. They came for me 3 nights later. I had expected them. Frances had warned me the arrests were moving faster than anyone had hoped, because once the drives were in the right hands at Bolton, things did not drag. She had told me to expect a last attempt. She had not been able to tell me what kind. It came as a knock at 11:10. 3 slow taps. Then Caleb's voice. "Mom, please, please open the door. I need to talk to you before anything else happens. Just me. Renata's not here. I swear on Dad." Swearing on Dad was the thing that told me Renata was in the driveway. I did not open the door. I went to the kitchen window at an angle the porch light did not reach, and I saw Caleb on the step, alone in appearance, and a second car parked behind his Jeep with its engine running and its headlights off. A man in the driver's seat. Not Renata. Not Devereaux. I picked up the phone and I dialed 911, and I said the words Francis had given me, and the dispatcher, a young woman in what sounded like Barry, said, "Ma'am, a unit out of Bolton has been on standby for your address since Tuesday evening. They are 4 minutes away. Do not open the door. Stay on the line with me, please." I stayed on the line. Caleb knocked again, harder. He began to cry. Through the door, through 42 years of knowing his voice, I heard him say, "Mom, if you don't open the door right now, they're going to come in through the back, and I can't stop them. I tried. I'm sorry, I tried." I kept my hand on the deadbolt, and I did not open. The OPP cruisers came up the lane without sirens. Later I would learn that there were 6 of them, 4 unmarked, 2 uniformed, approaching from 3 directions across the back field and the tributary in the front lane, the way Daniel and his father had once walked deer through their own bush. Caleb stepped away from my door with his hands already half raised, the way a man does, who has been practicing the gesture in his head. The second driver, whose name I would not learn for another month, ran. They caught him at the tree line. They did not handcuff Caleb on my porch. For this small kindness I was grateful, in a way I am still ashamed to admit. They walked him to the cruiser with his hands behind his back, but not cuffed, and he turned once at the open door of the car, and he looked up at the kitchen window where he knew I was standing. He mouthed, "I'm sorry, Mom." I did not mouth anything back. There was not a word I had for him yet. Renata was arrested the next morning in the parking lot of her yoga studio in Oakville. Sergeant Devereaux was arrested at his desk at 12 Division the same afternoon. Francis sent me a text, only 4 words. "It is done, love." I read it at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea in a mug Daniel had bought me on our honeymoon in Charlottetown in 1981, and for the first time in 2 years, the silence in my house felt like my own again, not something that had been done to me. The trial is still a year away, they tell me. I will testify. Francis will testify. The 4 USB sticks have become, I am told, the largest single piece of evidence in an investigation that now stretches from Windsor to Cornwall and involves 31 people I will never meet. Caleb took a plea in exchange for the names of the men above him. He will serve, his lawyer told me, between 11 and 14 years. Renata refused to plead. Her sentence will be longer. The trust Daniel had quietly built 18 months before his death, with a lawyer in Guelph the first had never met, paid out on the day the arrests were filed. It was enough to keep the land and the house and to replace the roof I had been worrying about since spring. It was enough, Margaret Lowen told me, gently, that I would not have to think about money again. I visited Caleb once, in March, at the detention center in Milton. I had not planned to. I woke up one morning and knew I had to, the way a woman of my age knows, finally, when a thing will not leave her until she does it. He could not meet my eyes for a long time. When he did, he looked younger than his 39 years, the way boys look when they have run out of the lies that were holding their faces together. "I didn't mean for Dad to die," he said. "I need you to know that. I told them to scare him, just scare him. I didn't know what they would do." "I know," I said. And I did know, which was almost the worst of it. But you knew what kind of men they were, Caleb. You knew, And you ask them anyway." He put his face in his hands. "I am not going to forgive you today," I said. "I do not know if I will ever forgive you, but your father loved you, and because he loved you, he carried this alone for as long as he could, and because he loved me, he left me the means to finish it. That is what I came here to tell you. The two of us, your father and I, we loved you better than you allowed." I stood up before he could answer. At the door I turned and I said, "Your father called me on the phone, Caleb. The night after the café." I heard his voice. "I know what the recording was now, and I know who made it, and I don't hold it against anyone. I just want you to know that I heard him. And he was angry, son. He was not sad. He was angry." Caleb began to cry, and I walked out, and I did not look back down the corridor. I drove home along Mississauga Road the long way, past the fields where Daniel's father used to hunt, past the school where Caleb had learned to read, past the Tim Hortons on Ontario Street, where a woman in a green parka had once folded a napkin into my palm. The sky over the Credit Valley was the blue of a wet slate going dry. I am 67 years old. My husband has been dead for 2 years and 3 months. My son is in a provincial facility awaiting transfer. My house has new locks and a new furnace, and a tenant in the back acres, a young couple from Guelph who grow garlic and keep 2 quiet goats. The tunnel is filled with concrete. The tributary runs clean past the cedars, the way it did when Daniel and I were young. I have learned 3 things that I wish I had known at 40, and that I am going to say now in case someone listening needs them the way I did. The first is that the people who plan to take everything from you will always tell you they are worried about you. The second is that the voice of a person you have loved for a long time does not need to be real to be true. What Daniel told me on the phone that night was true, whether he said it or whether Frances did, speaking the words he left her. Truth is not the same thing as who is speaking. And the third is that strength in a woman my age does not arrive. It is already there. It has been there since the first hard thing we ever survived. It only waits, quiet as a key under a floorboard, for the night we finally reach down and pick it up. I picked mine up on a Tuesday in October at a Tim Hortons in Mississauga, and I am still holding it, and I am not putting it down.